Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Again, my name is Christine Lewis, and I am so honored to get to represent District 2 on the Metro Council. So you heard my formal introduction, and I just want to spend a couple minutes talking a little bit about me and why I do this. I have been here at these lunches in the past, mostly as parts of panels, providing information about what Metro is working on within the topic area. And I'm really excited today to get to tell you a little bit about what I'm working on more broadly and how all of the pieces fit together. I've lived in this area since 2011. My now spouse and I bought a home in West Lynn, and I'm now raising 2 kids, and I'm so excited for them to be able to walk 1 block to our neighborhood elementary school. I'm excited to live 2 blocks off of a vibrant and exciting main street where I can walk for a drink after work, for dinner, or a couple of basics. That's the vitality of the neighborhood that we need to have in every single corner of our region. That's one of the missions of Metro, is to make sure that our regional goals exist beyond just the city of Portland or beyond any one jurisdiction, but we have 3 counties and 24 cities who are knit together by regional values centered on equity and the environment, but on all the things that make our region livable. So today I'm going to talk about a few things. Oh, I did that right, great. And I didn't mean to have 5 things, so in the spirit of not telling you 5 things I did last week, you'll get 2 extra bonus items as well. But I come to this work as somebody who really wants to represent this district. It's a big district. District 2 includes parts of Southwest Portland and Dunthorpe. It includes Lake Oswego and West Lynn, but it also includes Oregon City and Gladstone and Milwaukee and unincorporated Clackamas and Happy Valley. Those are a lot of very different and distinct communities. And I try and make it my goal to get out in the community as often as I can. And I want to hear from constituents. Naturally, my life takes me to many of these places. Yes, I live in West Lynn, but my favorite bookstore is in downtown Oregon City. Don't tell my other favorite bookstore in downtown Milwaukee. One of my favorite restaurants is just across the street. I take my kid to speech therapy in unincorporated Clackamas County. I go to the gym in the part of Clackamas that almost becomes Washington County. So I get around the district. But it's times like this where I can tell you what I'm working on and hopefully don't talk too long so we can save time for questions and real interaction that I find most meaningful in my work. Because I want to go back to Metro and I want to say, I've heard this in my district. This is a real experience that I've heard. It needs to be incorporated into our planning. A lot of the planning that we do at Metro is into the far distant future. We do some implementation, we do some things in real time, but we are looking into 2040, 2080. We are pushing the boundaries of what we need to do in order to prepare for our future. So thank you in advance for your smart questions, and hopefully they're polite. But yes, please use those blue cards. The first thing I'm going to talk about today is the urban growth boundary and our recent urban growth boundary expansion. I was here a year ago, and we were able to talk on a panel about the future of the region and growth. Our region is distinct amongst any other in the country because we have this urban growth boundary, which means that every 6 years, Metro works with our regional partners, our cities, and examines where we have opportunity to grow and what the need. How much land do we need and for what purpose? Do we need housing land? Do we need commercial land? Do we need industrial land? And again, we're on a 6-year cycle as set by the state, and we actually now have a mid-cycle check-in. So we actually do a quick look every 3 years to see how much acreage do we need for all of these different purposes, commercial, residential, and industrial. Well, in 2024, Metro Council looked at the data, and we concluded that we definitely needed large-scale industrial land. There are lots of opportunities, particularly in tech, where the businesses are going to come in and say they need 50 or more acres. And you have to have that land consolidated. It has to be ready to go. So that was a pretty urgent need for us. We also heard loud and clear that folks across the region expect more action on housing. So we looked at the opportunity for both industrial and housing lands as a top priority. That led us to bring in 1,200 acres of the Sherwood West area It was the urban reserve, so that means it had previously been designated as potential land to be brought into the urban growth boundary when the time was right, and council voted that it was the right time. We have parcels that have 50+ acres, again for that high-tech manufacturing need, and we also have room for more than 3,000 homes in that parcel that we brought in. Metro had previously funded a concept plan for the area, and I think it's really important to highlight the fact that we offer 2040 planning grants. We now offer them on a rolling basis, so it's no longer an annual review. Basically, every 3 months, we churn around a new review. And cities, jurisdictions, and tribes can apply if there is an area they're interested in expanding in. So you can do the planning work ahead of time and be ready for the next 3 or 6 year cycle. When we did this urban growth boundary expansion, council applied several conditions that I think are important to note. We made sure that there is planning for affordable housing in the future. We made sure to protect industrial land, so don't take those large 50-acre areas and divide them up. They got to be large sites and preserved as large sites. And then we also set standards for requiring public engagement, in particular, setting aside resource and time for tribal engagement as well. So as we look to the future of the region, I think it is important to note that Metro has looked at the urban growth boundary expansion through the lens of hearing from community need in addition to the statistics and the metrics that are laid out in state statute. I know Oregon City has a lot of urban growth boundary edge, so that's why I thought it was important to note here today this recent expansion. Next thing I'm going to talk about is transportation funding. There's a lot of uncertainty in transportation funding right now, given the changes of the federal administration. But what I am committed to is making sure that we take care of the projects that matter the most to Clackamas. There are several ways that we can do this. The first and foremost is through our Regional Flexible Funding Program. Regional Flexible Funds come down from the federal government in 2 forms. One is the Surface Transportation Block Grant, and the other is the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, often called CMAQ. We blend those 2 funds and put them on a 3-year rolling basis and use them in the region for projects that enhance corridor mobility and safe transportation options for all. And we are just entering the next phase of evaluation for our flexible funding. Our federal transportation dollars are allocated to the region because we are the metropolitan planning organization for the region. Across the country, MPOs get these dollars. They don't have a metro, but they do have a regional table that is made up of all of the jurisdictions. Just they don't have the additional layer like Metro does of being elected. But this amount of funds represents about 5% of our transportation dollars in the region. And we're looking at about $150 million that will be available for this next cycle. In the 28 package, we're looking at adding a renewed commitment to bonded projects. A bond package in previous times has been put together mostly between Metro and TriMet in order to build light rail. Metro has said, let's make the bond package what the community actually needs. And so Metro is evaluating bond projects that are not just light rail and that don't just draw down those particular dollars in match, but we're actually opening it up to include 5 projects are under consideration. And the one that's relevant here in Clackamas County and in Oregon City is the Sunrise Corridor Gateway Project. The Sunrise project has requested $15 million out of the bonding section of the Regional Flexible Funds. And the project would include the design work necessary to begin construction on Highway 112 in the segment between 122nd and 172nd. There's a second program through the Regional Flexible Funds, and it's the competitive allocation. There will be about $42 million available, and we've received 24 applications. In continuation of the Sunrise theme as a top priority, there are 2 projects of the 6 in Clackamas County that are along the Sunrise Corridor. Happy Valley applied for the Rock Creek Junction reconstruction, and then the Clackamas County application for Jennifer Street Multi-Use Trail. In addition, there are 4 other applications. Oregon City has an application for 99E McLoughlin, and that's $3.9 million. Milwaukee has a Railroad Avenue application. Lake Oswego has an application for Lakeview Boulevard, and the Gladstone application is for the Trolley Trail Bridge, $8.7 million. As you can hear from all of these examples, many of these are long sought after community needs. We've been talking about that Trolley Trail Bridge for, I think, 15 years. Somebody from Gladstone can tell me if it's been longer. But we have a lot of opportunity, particularly in this moment of time, to look at projects that are ripe and ready to get construction going, and maybe are not as dependent on other kind of federal leverage, and maybe are just gonna go it alone. So the opportunity ahead of us is to respond to all of the different planning stages. So there will be public input in the future before we make our final decisions later this summer and fall on the regional funding. And I would hope that all of you would engage, speak up for the projects that matter to you, your communities, and your businesses. The next opportunity for public engagement. But the next thing I want to talk about is our Expo Sports future. How many of you have been up to our Expo Center? Far North Portland, yeah. So the Expo is a very old facility. It was originally a fairground. Metro got it from Multnomah County when they no longer wanted to operate a fairground. And it's been run as a trade show venue for years. There's a lot of assets there that people think of very fondly. There are a lot of shows there that people go to year over year, and a lot of the vendors kind of consider it their Portland home. There's also some really hard past that we have to face at Expo. One of the halls was where Japanese internment happened. Vanport flood happened right adjacent. And when you talk to some tribes, that is right at the part of the Columbia River where they look at their fishing practices having been most sacred. So when we look at the future of Expo, particularly as trade shows are no longer really paying the bills because times have changed, we are thinking about using this space still to promote tourism, because Expo's core mission is heads in beds, getting tourists from across the state, across the region, across the West to come to Portland for tourist activity. We're evaluating a potential sports future, retrofitting some of our facilities so they are ready to host top-notch amateur and youth sports programs. We already do a lot of this. If you have a kid in volleyball, you've definitely been there for volleyball. If you happen to be really good at the cornhole game has filmed with ESPN2 at Expo Center. We are known with the cornhole people. But we're looking to expand that. What if we put some ice rinks in and had hockey? What if we had more indoor court space? What if we had more indoor running space? We are home of Nike, and where do you go for an indoor track in this region? I don't know. So we have really been visioning what one-of-a-kind sports tourism facility we could build to bring people, particularly, again, youth and amateur. We're not talking about hosting any like major league teams. But the idea being that they block off a lot of long weekends. Those tournaments would have first right of refusal. And then we would also use the facilities to support local community. But this fills a major gap. We've hired consultants who do this work across the country, and they can point that right now we don't host a lot. We do host some field activities, but we don't host a lot of indoor activities. And we would be looking forward to developing the Expo site. I could use the little laser pointer on here and show you all of the different pieces, but we are contemplating everything from twin sheet ice rink to 9 basketball courts that convert to 16 volleyball. We would have sports support spaces, so training rooms, locker rooms, that sort of thing. Food and beverage, family entertainment, places for the families that travel with young athletes to do something other than sit in the stands waiting for the next game. We would also be looking to make an impact, remembering some of the historical context we're in, with a community center, a garden, a place of memory and reconciliation, and to really commemorate Expo's history. This is a really pivotal moment for Expo because it is such a fragile economic ecosystem that trade shows are running. Right now, in a year where Cirque du Soleil comes to town, our Expo budget kind of works out. In years where Cirque du Soleil or another really big show like that doesn't come, we can't piece together a really solid foundation for Expo. We've had one roof fail. We took out a bond and replaced the roof. When the next couple of roofs go, we don't have that backstop. So that's why we're really committed to re-envisioning the future of the site and why I think a public-private investment on the site will be necessary. Now, the next point I'm going to talk about is our housing and homelessness work. And that was what I was originally invited to speak about. This will go on a little bit longer because it is so important and so critical, and we're in such a flux point right now with housing and homelessness in our region. So in 2018, when I was first elected, the exact same ballot where I was elected, voters across the region said yes. They said yes to building affordable homes for everybody in our community. We had committed to 3,900 homes funded through the bond, and we are on track to build close to 5,000 across the region. Locally, just over yonder, Las Flores is the most recent example opening here in Oregon City. But across the region, we've had apartments open where neighbors can finally find stability and a safe place to call home. Our commitment to the community was not only number of units, it was also deep levels of affordability. So you'll see deeply affordable homes, we're killing it on that metric as well. And we are nailing it on our family-sized homes. It's really much more expensive to build a 3-bedroom than it is to build a 1-bedroom. But we know that families need the space. So that's why we wanted to use the 2+ bedroom metric to really make sure about half of our units can accommodate families. So that's the good news. We passed a bond and money well spent. We're delivering on our promises. That said, our affordable housing bond will be fully spent out by 2027. So we have very few funds that are left, and those that are unspent are pretty much attached to projects already. We expect to see almost all of those projects in the ground and delivered within the next 2.5 years. That said, we will be paying off this bond for 20 years. So that's 2038 by the time we've fully repaid the bond. That is the next time we would be able to go to the ballot and without raising taxes, say, yes, we could renew this bond, we could do this again. But we're in an affordable housing crisis. We don't have enough. And the affordable housing dollars that are out there from the state and from the federal government oftentimes don't build that deep level of affordability. The level of affordability is called 0 to 30% median family income. The folks who don't have a paycheck other than their Social Security or their disability. The folks who are coming in off the streets. Those deep levels of affordability can't be reached in big numbers if you're using a traditional development plan. And that's why a local dollar matters so much and not just using tax credits or other federal programs. That's what began a conversation about a year ago about what if we looked at that other funding source, the one that we passed in 2020, supportive housing services, and when the moment is right and when the project is right, think about using some of those dollars to incentivize affordable housing in our region. So let me talk about that other measure. In 2020, we passed the supportive housing services measure. It is 2 taxes, one, personal income tax on the highest wages in the region, and the other is a business tax on profits over $5 million. Metro collects these taxes, and then we divide them up based on a formula of where people are paying the taxes between the 3 counties. and the counties receive the funds back. The counties each have their own plan that they have adopted and Metro has concurrently adopted. It's called a local implementation plan. And so each of the 3 counties, taxpayers pay dollars, they get collected by Metro, they go back to the county, and they get spent how the local plan has been written. Collectively, we have made an impact. We have great providers. I want to be very clear. We have great providers out there on the street helping people in crisis. The people who have been chronically homeless, the people who have been homeless, placed in housing, and fall back into homelessness. We have success stories about helping those that are hardest to help. We have 6,297 households placed as of July. We have 15,073 eviction preventions. We have 1,890 shelter units created or sustained. Those are good metrics. And we know from the stories that we hear of service providers, we have adequate systems at the very individual level. That said, Metro is sounding an alarm that the system itself hasn't reformed, that we don't have adequate controls over the funds and how they are spent, and we are not achieving regional outcomes. And part of that is because we don't have a regional North Star. When we passed the measure, we said we're going to spend $250 million a year because we think that's what we're going to raise. We're going to spend that money, and we're going to house 10,000 people. But housing 10,000 people isn't what voters expected. They expected to see noticeable difference on that street corner where that person who was always wearing that same blanket or in that same tent just always was there. So we're in this place right now where we're trying to figure out what is the future of the program. It's a 10-year tax. We gave ourselves 10 years to figure it out. So we have 10 years, we're nearly halfway through, to prove to the region that we're making good on these promises, or else the tax will completely sunset. Some of us are talking about how do we get a renewal? How do we figure out what the right amount for a renewal would be? But otherwise, we're looking at a pretty significant cliff coming up here in just 5 years. I don't think it's too early to begin a conversation about what happens in 2030, 2031, because we need to make choices about how we design this program. Are we designing it to completely sunset? Are we designing it to have a step down? Are we designing it to maintain? Metro's been listening and learning and responding. We've been out in community groups. We've listened to cities, we've listened to counties, we've listened to providers. We have a tri-county planning body that I'm lucky enough to sit on that meets once a month for 2.5 hours on a Wednesday evening. And we get deep into the weeds on 6 regional goals, 6 things that across the region, we should have fairly standardized. So it doesn't matter what county you live in, you know that there are those same things happening, whether it be the way that we work with the workforce, the people who help homeless people so that they have adequate training and good wages, whether it be the landlord protection program. So if you're a landlord, you're not dealing with 3 different standards and 3 different numbers to call if you need help with somebody who's been placed in one of your units. So we have these 6 key principles that we're trying to bring a regional approach to. And we need to work really hard on what are our expectations for a regional program. But we've been talking about this pretty publicly since the fall. We've heard feedback and we've seen some proposed alternatives, and I really want to thank Clackamas County. Both current leadership and previous leadership have been extremely responsive and very iterative at saying, we think we hear this would be what would happen under that scenario, could we tweak that? So Clackamas County, I think, has been fairly responsive to this conversation. But that has led Metro Council to consider 2 things, both a potential ordinance that would reform and frankly give some more guardrails to the program, and also a potential ballot measure that we're currently considering could be as early as this fall. That is malpractice in PowerPoint, but I figured it was worth putting up on the screen. So this is the ordinance overview in terms of an ordinance could give us more effective oversight. It could give us a more efficient way of measuring ourselves as a regional government with a regional plan, and frankly underscore accountability for these tax dollars. And then the next slide is still PowerPoint malpractice, but it's the details about the things that we would consider to put in a ballot measure. One thing we've heard is that we might want to consider some tax relief in addition to potentially wanting to extend this into the future. There are many folks who do qualify for the personal income tax who 5 years ago wouldn't have qualified, or who are just barely making it in this kind of inflationary environment, and we would want to provide them some tax relief. We are also committed to a smooth transition, so no matter what the future state of the measure is, we want to make sure that the counties are able to stabilize, particularly in the middle of budget preparation for next year. So we want to make sure that we have ways that the current system with the 3 counties each having their own local implementation plan can still connect up to whatever the North Star or the guiding regional vision is. And then with our commitment to finding that North Star or that regional vision, that thing that we're trying to do with this enormous resource, it's the largest per capita resource dedicated to homelessness in the country. We can't squander it. We have to be better stewards of it. So we have a president's work group that had their first meeting yesterday. It has individuals from cities and counties, it has service providers, it has members of the business community. And it is solely focused on spending time deeply reflecting on what it is we're trying to do. I think this tells you our next steps. Yeah, so we met for the first time yesterday. We're meeting every 2 to 3 weeks. And then we are hoping within the next couple of months to begin further constructive conversation about moving forward with reforms, hopefully via ordinance. Okay, now I'm gonna move on to something. Okay, you notice we got real serious there. I have a couple of light updates before I end and take your questions. It's only gonna get lighter from here, guys. So there's a lot happening at the Willamette Falls Locks. I'm really excited that after years of seeing that on both sides of the river, Westland and Oregon City, there's been need for investment. We feel like there is progress. Want to recognize that both Kate and Leslie are here from Willamette Falls Trust. Want to recognize all of the good work and stewardship that the Grand Ronde is doing, despite some challenges on this side of the river. But right in the middle of the river is the Willamette Falls Locks. How many of you have ever been by boat through the locks? Okay, I see some hands in the room. I have the opportunity to chair the Willamette Falls Locks Authority, which was created by the state legislature as a public corporation just 3 years ago. And the authority is in the position of readying itself to accept ownership of the locks from the Army Corps of Engineers. We will accept that ownership in order to finish some construction and maintenance and then reopen. The Army Corps of Engineers did their part of the construction, and they finished almost a year ago. And their work was on stability and seismic. They want to protect the stability of the upper pool. Our next phase of construction is actually about operability, making sure that some of the gudgeon arms and the gates are stable and will work. And we have half the funds that we need, not quite half. We have some of the funds that we need, thanks to the state legislature a few years ago. We're currently pursuing the remaining ask, because when the legislature gave us those funds, they said, we're not giving you everything. But we need another $11.4 million in order to get the locks up to full operability. We're pursuing that this legislative session. Meanwhile, we are also preparing ourselves to start inspections and investigations on the lock structure and operation. So this is the pre-construction work that's necessary in order to begin to spend those dollars that we already have in hand. Our goal, if we can continue on this timeline, both in funding with the state legislature this session, but also our continued partnership with Army Corps of Engineers, who actually just had 2 big deadlines pass this week, yesterday, for feedback on some of their work product. We expect that we would be able to open in 29 or 30. So we are moving ahead. We meet monthly. It is a labor of love from many individuals in our community to help support this work. But I do envision, with the support of the state legislature and continued presence from the Army Corps of Engineers, which I can't take for granted anything these days, but I do have the hope that we will be able to see this locks reopen in a few years. And then if you hadn't heard, there's a baby elephant. You can go visit her. There's no special ticket, just buy a regular ticket. My hot tip is that after lunch, between like noon and 2, she does seem to be awake and very playful and fun. And my claim to fame is that I got to be one of the test audience members because we wanted to see how she would react to people. And I brought my 4-year-old, and he had seen an elephant before, but she had never seen a kid before. So my kid was the first kid that baby Tula 2 got to see. But that said, I do think it's really important to note this birth just because of the endangered status of elephants. Elephants are a big species everybody knows about, but the work of the zoo goes far beyond that. We do a lot of wildlife conservation and keeping some species alive that aren't as big and sexy as elephants, but small like frogs and turtles, and even some big ones like condors. So really proud of the work that the zoo does, both to be a fun place to take families, but also some real science and some real conservation of significance. I think I might have one more slide. Oh, no, that was my website, oregonmetro.gov. And then one late-breaking piece of news that I couldn't even get into the slide, but announced just this morning. One of the areas that I didn't get to touch on was parks and nature. Metro is really known for big nature close to home, Newell Creek. We have many other nature parks in the region. But we passed a 2019 bond in order to continue the progress we've made as a region of protecting particularly really valuable wetland and area that's important to water quality. But we just made a purchase of the Eagle Creek Golf Course, which has been on the market since 2021. And it's 553 acres adjacent to the Clackamas River, right next to Estacada. It's square in the middle of one of our targets. We got 24 targets across the region of really valuable riparian area. It's square in the middle of that. And this is the largest acquisition under the 2019 bond. And by dollar value, it's the largest purchase we've made. So Metro will take ownership, or possession, I guess is the word, sometime in March. And if you're a golfer like me, get your rounds in, because I believe the last day they'll be open is the 28th of this month. So that's late breaking news. Press release went out like as I was getting ready to come here, but it's a local investment that I'm excited about. With that, I think it's question time.
All right.
Oh, I keep this one? Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Christine. We have a number of questions. Let's see. The first one is, can everybody hear me? Okay. What new efforts does Metro have underway to reduce Metro transfer stations' impacts on Oregon City? That is, are they opening any solid waste facilities that would reduce trips in Oregon City? I know that that was something they were talking about in the Clackamas industrial area a few years ago. I'm not sure what the status is.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So everybody here is familiar with the Metro Transfer Station just down the road? Okay. We have been spending the past year working on a systems facilities plan. The systems facilities plan is not just specific to Metro South or to Metro Central or other transfer station, but it's a broader conception of what we want our transfer station approach to be in the future. And it's not yet adopted, but it is in a final draft. But I expect something quite like it will be approved. Our goal is to have depot style 6 stations across the region, so that the ideal is that you will never have more than a 15 to 20 minute drive in order to find a local depot where you can drop your hard to recycles, some of your debris, and that is going to be really with a focus on community scale drop off for a lot of materials that are coming to Metro South, hazardous waste, for instance. The other thing that we know about Metro South is it is a facility that is too small for its dual purpose role. Right now it serves commercial, so the trucks that come to your and my house, pick up our trash, they go through Metro South, and in the same stream of traffic, you have me with my Subaru with my weekend construction project in the back of it. That is truly inefficient, and there is no way to rejigger the place so it can adequately serve both kinds of trucks. We looked for a large site. We looked really, really hard and even had a buying option in on one off of Jennifer Street. It wasn't a good fit. There's probably not a large site that can support both of those roles. So in the future, we're gonna look to separate those roles onto 2 parcels of land. So there will still be a place here in Oregon City or Clackamas area where I can take my Subaru with my weekend's worth of junk in the back and get rid of it. But there will also be a place for the commercial trucks to do their transfer station work. And I can't tell you which is moving, which is staying. There are good arguments for either, but we will be separating uses and building out a new site in this part of the region.
Thank you. The 2023 Regional Transportation Plan was adopted at the end of 2023, and it emphasized solutions that prioritize criteria such as targeting climate science, economic inequities, and reductions in vehicle miles traveled per capita. Given federal election results and what seems to be a national shift in priorities, does Metro envision a shift in the way Metro administers the current Regional Transportation Plan? And would they make any changes to the next RTP update in 2028?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Regional Transportation Plan is a little bit of a blueprint about the projects that we prioritize. It's how we spend our time, both as elected officials and regional leaders, in planning and in thinking and in investing. But it's also the list in which you have to make sure your project is on it in order to make sure that you're gonna get fully funded. So if you're not in what's called the constrained list of the RTP, the constrained list is the list of projects where we think in a constrained funding environment, which is the real world. We're not in La La Land. So if you're not in that list, your project is not gonna be eligible to get the full funds, including federal funds. So I do think that we have a change in what federal funds will fund in the region, in particular competitive grants that we had been awarded for certain projects, even in Q4 of last year. We've since heard or seen movement, we're not getting them. Does that mean we back away completely from those projects? Probably not, because for so many of those projects, they're a 10-year operation to get them going and stood up. And a few years delay is definitely costing us real money, time, opportunity, and safety. But I think we would still move on those projects. That said, we should be taking advantage of the projects that are on that RTP that are still very fundable in this current administration. The reason my slides focused on Sunrise today is because I do think Sunrise has large components that are extremely fundable and attractive. There is a large industrial area that if Sunrise gets fully developed, gets unlocked. That's the sort of magic like that even a purpley bluey place, I think, can still align with this administration.
Great. Thank you. With the governor focusing on affordable housing in her legislative bill again this year, what can Metro do to increase housing production to her goal of 36,000 new units each year? You touched on that earlier, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm really committed to the governor's plan of increasing housing stock. Without more housing, we will continue to see both affordability crisis and homeless crisis. So with Metro's largest funding source, I do think it would be appropriate, particularly in places where we would be serving populations who had been homeless, to create units with those dollars. And I do think that there are other ways that we can talk about it, but at the end of the day, building more units at all income is necessary. The money we have, I think, needs to be very focused at the deeply affordable. Then on the non-money side, on the policy front, I do think we're trying to be helpful. You see us having done a UGB expansion, 3,000 units in Sherwood West. and looking for other areas, particularly with those 2040 grants, where when cities or counties want to work on redeveloping or densifying, we can help. Corridor vision plans, area plans, all of those are eligible for 2040 planning grants that can help address areas that are not like really living up to their full potential when it comes to housing or mixed use.
A couple more questions on the housing front. Land use laws passed 50 years ago were progressive, but today are regressive and are much of the cause of home prices in one region. Could expanding the UGB at a faster clip help lower land costs and in turn home prices?
So there's a lot there. Progressive versus regressive. I think that the opportunity to look at the urban growth boundary as a way to be planful in our expansion is different than just the market forces, because I do think that having predictability is actually good for the market as it is good for community outcomes or community benefit. In terms of if we had faster UGB expansion, would we be able to keep up and be that planful and committed to getting the highest and best, housing density and housing use out of that area? I don't know. Because I do think that there are parts of this country where you have unlimited access to land, and yes, housing is slightly cheaper, but is that all because of the land price itself? Land price is a factor, but there are other factors in those communities.
Okay. What is the average price of the affordable homes that have been built, and at what percentage are they sold and or occupied?
Great question. So by and large, the affordable housing bond has been used to produce apartments. There are 6 projects that have a home ownership component, and those are all through community land trusts, AKA Habitat for Humanity or similar product. So those homes, I cannot tell you an average price for, but you are looking at folks who are probably 40 to 50% median family income and have been certified by those organizations that your housing costs are not going to be more than about a third of your housing of your paycheck. But when it comes to affordable housing, when we're looking at the apartments, they are all across the region, specifically for people who make under median family income. And then when you make under that median family income, your cost is set so that you're paying only about a third of your income in your rent.
So it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Would you support dropping tolling with the high collection costs for a statewide road fee collected on our power bill?
So I have been long an advocate for moving away from tolling the Abernathy Bridge, so down on that. I do believe that there is a place for tolling on the interstate bridge, but only because we're in partnership with Washington State, and Washington State already has a tolling program. So when you look at the cost of collection for like a program that's already there, their cost of collection will be very proportionally small. In terms of funding scenario alternatives, the power bill has been floated and is particularly interesting as we're looking at electrification as part of our future. I'm very interested in it from the perspective that a lot of our utilities could separate out where the car charging part of your bill is compared to your regular electricity use. I think on a more near-term scale, some sort of VMT combined with a vehicle registration fee increase will actually give us what we need for the short-term future for local and state funding.
All right. Would the Expo Center vision contemplate access challenges? Clark County would have better access than Clackamas since it's not such a central location in the region.
Yeah, conversations about what to do with the city of Vancouver and if they would owe anything, if we would, in particularly with the tourism lens in mind, require that when activities or sports events came, that they could promise a certain proportion of hotel beds on this side of the river compared to the other. Those are definitely in play. In terms of access, I do think that we would see an increase in use from Clackamas County for things like the ice skating rink, because right now if you have a kid who does hockey, you're driving way west of Beaverton towards Hillsborough, you're already crossing the region for something like that. But the hope is that, 4 days out of 7, it's actually a West Coast regional tournament or something kind of bigger, and not just going up for practice or to go for a run in the gym. Really looking for that community use, probably like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, knowing that we're hoping to book out Thursdays through Sundays for big events.
Great. What is the status of the Kellogg Creek Dam removal, and what is the funding gap?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Metro was really excited to give $10 million in a grant towards removing the Kellogg Creek Dam in Milwaukee. We are still excited. We're more hesitant now because that grant was supposed to help draw down federal dollars. The federal dollars that best would draw down that project, or that entire program out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act has completely been canceled. It would have scored really well in that program, but it's been canceled. So I don't know what the future of federal funds is in the short term. I was talking to one of the lead staff members from the Watershed Council, and she said there's a plan B and they're ready to move forward. $10 million won't do the whole thing, but they're not returning the money, and I stand by waiting to hear the details of plan B and what we can do either in phases or with the money that's in hand.
Wonderful, thank you. What about Forest Park and cutting trees for the electric company? I'm not sure if that's a Metro question or not, but.
Forest Park is not a Metro park. It's a City of Portland park. I've read like one Oregonian story. I'm not qualified to have a real opinion on it.
Okay, sounds good. No problem. What is the biggest barrier Metro faces working constructively with leadership of the 3 counties and major cities, and how is this barrier being addressed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the question really highlights that we have barriers, right? Like, we're a local government. We, just like all local governments, have to balance our budget and have to be directly accountable to folks that we see in the grocery store, at the park, and at our kids' pickup. That said, we operate kind of differently than a local government. Because we are regional and because we are really magnifying the resources of the whole region to spotlight and kind of spot treat issues and areas when they come up. Historically, Metro's biggest partners have been cities. We get a lot of partnership with cities because we're providing urban services. But then you come over to supportive housing services, and we are so reliant on our work with counties. And that's a really different kind of conversation than with the cities, because there's 3 of them. And I do think that we have really different expectations from constituents in the core of Portland versus not in the core of Portland. And I think that includes East Portland. Like, I think there's much more that Clackamas has in common with East Portland, who's also been left behind by Clackamas, but also by Metro, but also other governments and other funding programs. We have a lot in common with East Portland. And then there's Washington County has traditionally been a good ally when working at regional tables with Metro. But I do think that they've kind of gone their own way recently as well.
All right. Along those lines a little bit, why does Clackamas County, there's a perception anyway, that Clackamas County does not get its fair share of regional investments such as transportation? There's a sense that there's a growing regional imbalance. Are there any insights on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I do think that in some cycles, Clackamas has done really well. Clackamas population within Metro is under a quarter. So yes, there are 3 counties, so in your mind, you start to divide things up 3 ways. But if you're only 23% of the population thereabout, are you benchmarking for a quarter? Are you benchmarking for a third? Either way, we have to get our fair share, and our fair share is really being able to say we have a priority and getting it fully funded. So a bunch of small projects that might equal that share no longer adds up for me. So I really look at Sunrise as one of those opportunities. I have the privilege of getting to help steer the conversation around 82nd Avenue and some improvements that are going to be made to transit on 82nd. 6 out of the 7 miles are Multnomah County. 1 mile is Clackamas County. Clackamas County definitely needs that investment, but don't count that 1 mile as a Clackamas County priority. Don't count it as you've gotten your share, because the other 6 miles really tell me that it's a Multnomah County priority. So that's how I look at it.
All right, thank you. Does Metro have a metric for maximum population and density for the region?
Not that I know of. Phoning a friend, staff, do we have a metric? For it's more regional centers, town centers. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Andy's pointing out that in our 2040 vision plan, we have areas that have been designated as town centers, and those areas are expected to have higher density, just like the city of Portland, like regional center does. And then corridor planning, we have identified corridors that are higher population, but also high transit or high transportation need.
All right. So that is the extent of our questions. Is there any other questions among the audience? If not, thank you so much, Councilor Christine Lewis.
Thank you so much.
All right.